You have undoubtedly noticed the aroma of pancakes this morning wafting in. Worship never smelled so tasty. Our Boy Scouts have been putting on a pancake breakfast. Hopefully you've had time to enjoy. I don't know how long they're hanging out afterwards, but I bet they'll have leftovers, so go talk to them. Get to know our Scout troop. We're so grateful for the ministry that they do in our community as well. How many of you all enjoy going to family reunions? Just raise your hand. How many of you like family reunions? Weird. How many of y'all are less than thrilled when family reunions come around? Just go ahead and be, I'm the only one. Okay, no, there's some others of us in here. Yeah. I don't know what it is, about the Silvers family reunions. I don't know exactly what goes on, but I have the weird uncle, the odd cousin. I have the family that, for whatever reason, as I have been growing up in faith and continued my education, the conversations have shifted. It used to be like I would go to a family reunion and I was just one of the crowd. I was the sort of sarcastic loner. That was my role. But now, as I have become, ordained and into ministry for these last few years, it seems to me that every conversation has to deal with faith. And they want to know, are they living right? They want to check in with me about, are they doing their faith correctly, as if I somehow know all the answers. Whenever it's time to pray before the meal, Matthew, would you mind saying the prayer? And I recycle the same prayer every time. Because I want somebody else to pray. It doesn't have to be me. And the conversations have gotten even stranger the more education I've acquired, because now that I have my doctorate degree, now they're asking me all kinds of medical questions. I keep explaining to them I'm not that kind of doctor, but they keep asking. And so now I've started giving medical advice too, just to be ornery, as my family puts it. Just to be ornery. I don't know what it is about family reunions. Sometimes they're wonderful, but it's always in those moments where you have the peacemaker kind of trying to settle a qualm that's been going on for decades. And you have the same arguments being recycled. For some reason, politics starts coming up around the dinner table, and you can leave from those moments thinking, man, my family, what a piece of work. Not your family, my family. Our text today comes from Luke chapter 15. We have been journeying through some parables, and this morning's parable is probably one of the most familiar ones for us. Hear these words from Luke 15, starting in verse 11. Then Jesus said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to the father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me.' So he divided his property between them. And a few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of the country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough to eat and to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and I will go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him coming and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate.' For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field. And when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked him, what was going on? He replied, "Your brother has come and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has got him back safe and sound." Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, "Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him." Then the father said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we have to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found." I went into Kevin's office this week because I was supposed to preach the two parables that came before this one, the story of the lost sheep and the story of the lost coin. But I had realized I preached those texts recently, and I can't do it. I can't do that, not in the same year. And my hesitation with this particular passage, as I was talking with Kevin, was that this passage is so overdone. How many times have we talked about the prodigal son or heard songs that are sort of dedicated this through line of grace and redemption and forgiveness? But that might be just the most important reason for us to visit this parable once again. It is overdone, and it is underdone. Meaning, I think, yes, we are familiar, but it is that familiarity that perhaps can help us see anew something that we just might need to hear from this story today. As I said, this is the third parable in a series of parables about lost things. Amy Jill Levine, who wrote a book entitled The Stories of Jesus, it's all about the parables of Jesus, she writes that titles really do affect the way in which we hear the story. For instance, those three parables I've mentioned, the parable of the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the prodigal son, all carry some sort of weight. You get a sense of what the story is about. The shepherd will go look for the lost sheep, the widow will look for the lost coin, and the son and the father will look day and night for the son who has been lost. But she argues maybe better fitting titles would be the shepherd who lost a sheep, or the woman who lost a coin. These things didn't get lost on their own. Or the father who lost his son, or sons. If we brought in new titles to these familiar stories and began to frame them in different ways, perhaps we might begin to see a different angle of these stories. Because after all, parables are meant to do that, to show us a slice of life, but through many different lenses. So by the time we hear them again and again and again, there is always something fresh popping out off the pages or ringing in our ears as we hear the story told once more. The parable of the father who lost his sons is not just a simple story. It's not one clear-cut thing. It's three stories intertwined into one. Three characters who are complicated and unique and each acting perhaps unexpectedly. We have the young son who comes to his father requesting his inheritance early, before his father has passed. "Please give me my inheritance." And the father gives in. The Greek says he gives half his life to the younger son. Half of his livelihood, half of everything he had acquired in his life, which was well more than the younger son deserved. In that culture, it was likely the older son would inherit 2/3 or the majority of the inheritance, while subsequent children would get far less. Yet the father treats his son generously for whatever reason. We don't know the motives, but hands over that inheritance, and he goes out, leaves home, sets sail, runs away, and sort of squanders all his money through dissolute living. That's what the scripture says. He comes on hard times. A famine hits the country that he's living in, and he has to go to work, and he has to do this sort of work that he feels is beneath him and not good, and he's struggling. He is struggling just to eat. And a light bulb goes on, and he says, I can go home. Perhaps I can apologize. So he begins working on his speech. Now, it's really hard to tell from the text. Is his apology genuine? Or is he just rehearsing the lines that he thinks his father wants to hear? Oh, Dad, I've sinned against heaven and you. Don't call me your son anymore. Just let me work in the fields like a servant. Let me just live off the land here. And so he's practicing these lines over and over again. And the spotlight shifts from the younger son to the father. This father, I've been wrestling with this text all week. Why on earth did he say yes when his younger son came to him requesting this large sum of money? Oh, sure, here you go. They didn't talk about a plan. They didn't talk about what's going on down there. If my child comes to me asking for a large sum of money, I need to know what the plan is. And I'm betting from your laughter, many of you would do the same. You're just not going to reach in your wallet and fork it over and say, good luck. Why did the father act the way he does? Could his actions, in fact, have led to his feeling of loss? Could his actions be the result, or the result of his actions be the sort of heaviness he feels from that moment? You get a sense that he's worried day in and day out. He is going out to check to see if his younger son is alive or will ever return. Any scrap of news, nothing's coming to him. Why did he do what he did? We don't really know. Like I said, the scripture doesn't tell us the motivations, the internal dialogue. All we do know is that when the younger son finally does make his way home, he is looking for him, because the scripture says he runs out to meet him, embraces him, kisses him on the cheek, and the younger son starts his whole spiel. The father is listening. He says, this sounds a little rehearsed. Father, I've sinned against heaven and you. I'm no longer worthy to call you your son. And the father cuts him off. He doesn't get through his whole speech that he's been practicing every step from his home somewhere else to back home for the family reunion. Instead, his father cuts him off, but he doesn't talk to his son directly. This is a part of the text I've always missed. Why does the father not address the younger son? Instead, he turns to his servants, those that serve in his household, and he says, go grab the finest robe, go put a ring on his finger, let's kill the fatted calf, let's have some good Casey barbecue, let's start a party, because my son who was lost is now found, he's back to life. But he doesn't talk to him directly. He doesn't say, oh son, I'm so glad you're home. I've been worried to death about you. I wonder what's going on there. Why did he not say those things to his son? What's going on in his mind as he sees this lost one who has hurt him, or the feelings he's feeling well up inside of him at the sight of his son returning home? And the spotlight shifts. Because we forgot about the older brother. Where has he been this entire story? We get a brief mention in the first verse of our text that the father had two sons, but we've only been focused on the younger one, then the father, and now the older son. No one thought to go send a messenger out to the field to say, oh, by the way, there's a party going on. Can't you smell the pancakes wafting in? Can't you smell the food? Don't you hear the music? There's a party happening because your brother's home. No. The older son's been out working in the field all day. Nobody sends him any word. He makes his way to the house, hearing all the frivolity and smelling all the aroma of the good food. And he asks somebody, what is going on? Is it my birthday? No, great news. Your younger son, you remember him. He took half the money and ran. He's back. Aren't you happy? There's a party. And he's fuming. He is angry. He will not step foot in that house, which, hey, bravo. He was wise enough not to go inside because you all know what's going to happen. Way to go. Way to be in control. Way to take a breath as we tell our children and count to 5. Dad finally comes out, and this conversation has been boiling for years. And the older son lets him have it. I have slaved away for you all these years. I've done everything you've asked. I was out in the field working today all day. Where were you for me? You've never given me a party. You've never treated me with such lavishness. This son of yours, not my brother, this son of yours did all these things, and here you are treating him like he's royalty. What about me? I've been good. I've been faithful. And the father, sensing some strained family dynamics going on, says, son, you have been with me day in and day out. Everything I have is yours. But your younger son was lost and is found. He was dead and is now alive. And that's the end of the story. That's all we get. We are left hanging on one of the most incredible cliffhangers, wondering, will the son go in? Will they reconcile? Will the family come together? Will this be one of those great family reunions where everyone's laughing and telling jokes? Or one of those terrible ones where everyone's throwing things and yelling at each other and arguing over such and such and accusing so-and-so of this and that? You know the ones. Well, maybe just me, not you. That is the end of our tale. I don't know about you, but I'm not sure I'd go to that family reunion that's unfolding there in the house. You know, we have this sort of fundamental belief as people of the Christian faith that all people are children of God, which is a really radical thing when you think about it. It's a rather stretching, confrontational, challenging thing to think about, that we have brothers and sisters who live all across the globe, hail from different countries, hail from different religions, hail from different genders, different identities, that we have all of these different people. And one of our fundamental pieces of faith is that they are our brothers and sisters. They are our aunts and uncles, our mothers, our fathers, which is radical. That is a mind-blowing sort of thing to wrap your head around. I sometimes talk with parents who have 2 or more children, and it's always fascinating to me how different those children can be. Raised in the same household, to the same parents, yet they have their own unique personality, their own way of seeing the world, and yet somehow they try their best to love each other, to care for one another. They don't always get it right. It's sometimes a challenge. Sometimes people stop talking to each other for weeks at a time. But families that work are the families that put in the work, that take the time to sit down and listen and hash through some of those difficult things. And it's not easy. And maybe that's part of what the parable is trying to show to us today. That family is hard. Family is hard sometimes. It's not just about the blood we share, but it is about the connection of love that ties us to one another. We are none of us the same, all raised by different parents, all grown up in different environments, and yet our faith challenges us to consider that we are in fact brothers and sisters, all part of the same family of God. That we are all loved unconditionally by a God of grace and compassion and mercy. There are times when I have been the wanderer, running away from home, picking up all my possessions and saying, "See ya." There have been times I've stood at the edge of the drive, looking down the road, hoping, praying that reconciliation can happen, that what was lost can be found once again, that what I once thought was dead could live once again. And there are times I have been at work and ignoring everything else, just doing my best to be faithful and true, and even a little resentful when I see others getting the love that I thought should have been mine. This parable reminds us that family is hard. It's hard for us to always see eye to eye. Sometimes we get angry and run away from our problems or from each other rather than face them. Sometimes we throw our hands up in frustration when we don't get what we think we deserve. And sometimes, at our best moments, we are trying to make peace with our children, with our brothers and sisters, in order to reforge those family bonds. Once again, family is hard. It is hard. Don't give up, the parable seems to be saying. Don't give up. I know that seems like an option, and you could if you wanted to. Don't give up. Don't run away when things get tough. Don't give up hope that the wayward son will return home. Don't be angry with those who don't behave or think or act like you do. There is room around the table for all of us. And yeah, it's hard work. It's hard work. To work through those challenges, those differences, to make peace. Not just for peace sake, but because we are, in fact, beloved children of God. Are we going to stay outside? Are we going to go in? Are we going to ignore our problems? Are we going to work through them? Are we going to find ways to heal the rifts that exist, that we think exist between us because of whatever differences we observe? Family is hard. I think I would amend my statement I said earlier. I think I would go to this family reunion after all.